to Tennessee's at-home learning series for literacy. Today's lesson is for all our 6th graders out there, though everyone is welcome to tune in. This is the second lesson in this week's series. My name is Megan Gilly, and I am a 6th grade teacher in Tennessee schools. I'm super excited to be your teacher for today's lesson. Welcome to my virtual classroom. If you didn't see our previous lesson or you want to revisit this lesson, you may go to the Tennessee Department of Education's website at www.tn.gov/education. You can still tune in if you haven't seen our other lessons, but it may be fun to go back and watch the others, since today we'll be talking about things that we previously learned. Today, we will be learning about how the author develops the story of Arachne. Before we get started, to participate fully, you need a paper, pen or pencil, a firm surface to write on, your independent practice from Lesson 11, and the student packet for ELA Grade 6, Lesson 12, which can be found on the Tennessee Department of Education's website, again at www.tn.gov/education. So gather all your materials and let's begin. In Lesson 11, we read Arachne by Jean Lang, which is a Greek origin myth. The story told of a mortal, Arachne, who got into a weaving contest with the goddess Athena. After our lesson, you wrote a journal entry from the goddess Athena's point of view. These were the directions. Write a journal from Athena's point of view, explain how she felt during her day with Arachne, and retell the myth that we learned from that particular point of view. So I want you to take a minute to reread what you wrote. I'm going to be reading an example to you, and as I read, I want you to be listening for words or phrases in the journal entry that show how Athena feels about Arachne. Follow along. Why am I still so angry? Is it because the girl Arachne thought that she was a better craftswoman than me? Or is it because she didn't listen to my warning that challenging the talents of the gods and goddesses would be a crime to be punished for? Or is it because she chose to mock the powers of the gods and goddesses with her tapestry? Whatever it may be, Arachne suffered the fate that she chose, even after being warned. What message would it send to the mortal humans that they can challenge the advice, authority, talent, or power of the gods and goddesses? How silly for her to think of herself better than me, the goddess Athena. I tried to warn her, both in disguise as the old woman and as myself, that to rival a god would be an unforgivable mistake, and she still persisted. Some people might think the punishment of turning poor Arachne into a spider may have been too harsh, but her foolish pride in her skills gave me no other option but to act as I did. Arachne will spend forever doing what she loves, but is a creature that few love and many fear. Please listen to my advice carefully. Mortals will never possess the knowledge or skills that the gods and goddesses do. To believe otherwise would be a crime to be punished for. Wow. So in this example, how did the writer let you know what Athena's feelings toward Arachne were? Right? In the first sentence, she says that Athena is angry. She also called her silly and talked about her foolish pride when referring to Arachne. So I want you to take just a quick minute to jot down any words or phrases in your journal that show how Athena feels about Arachne. All right, great. Today, our goal is to analyze how the author develops the plot of the story. We will begin with me showing you what that looks like, and then there will be time for you to practice on your own with my support. Finally, I will assign you independent work that you can complete on your own after the lesson ends. So to organize your notes for today, let's create a 3-column chart. We're going to label the columns plot element, episode, And then we're going to add the third column, which is how does this episode lead to the resolution? So I want you to create this chart. In this lesson, you will learn how to describe the way a story's plot unfolds in a series of episodes by identifying major episodes or events and considering each event's role in the plot. Meaning everything, every scene, every episode, event, whatever you want to call it, matters. There's a reason the author puts it in there, so we have to think about, well, why did the author include that? So let's take our chart and continue. Last lesson we read what a myth was, and the story Arachne is a myth, which is a kind of story which attempts to interpret some aspect of the world around us by discussing something that comes into being. What comes into being in this own story? Well, spiders. The myth explains how spiders came into being. The story has been retold over hundreds, probably thousands of years, but the version we read was written by Jean Lang. In this story, again, Arachne is transformed into a spider. Today, we are going to look at how the author crafted this story. Every story consists of 5 parts to a plot. Can you think of any or all of them? I know that you see 4 that are listed here, and one of them is an additional one that maybe you didn't consider as its own part. So we're going to review each one. The very first part of the plot is the exposition. This is where the author reveals the main characters in setting and usually the conflict of the story. But for this purpose of this story, I want us to look at conflict a little bit differently. Conflict, again, is a struggle between the main character and someone or something else. It's first introduced in the exposition. Of course, then we have our rising action, which is the development of the conflict. It leads up to the climax, which is next. It is the turning point of the conflict. You're usually on the edge of your seat. It's the most exciting part of the story. And while we usually have falling action, we're going to jump to resolution for this lesson, which describes the results of the climax and ties together the loose ends of the story. I always tell my students the resolution doesn't necessarily mean that the conflict is fixed or the problem is solved, but it does come to an end. So our question for today is, what is the series of episodes or events that lead to Arachne being transformed into a spider? I want you to think about that again. What is the series of episodes that lead to Arachne being transformed into a spider? So to answer those questions, we're going to follow these 2 steps. 1, we're going to reread parts of the text, recording episodes or events that make up the basic elements of the plot. And then 2, we're going to ask ourselves the question in the 3rd column. How does this episode or event lead to the resolution of the story? So let's reread some of the text. Again, we are looking for the exposition, which is the place where characters, setting, and conflict are introduced. The hay that so short a time ago was long, green grass with fragrant meadow-sweet and gold-eyed flowers growing amongst it in the green meadow land by the river is now dry hay, fragrant still, though dead, and hidden from the sun's warm rays underneath the dark wooden rafters of the barn. Occasionally, a cat on a hunting trip comes into the barn to look for mice or to nestle cozily down into purring slumber. Now and then a hen comes tiptoeing through the open door and makes for itself a secret nest. Sometimes children come in, chasing cat or hen, or merely to tumble each other over the soft hay, and when they have gone away, a little more of the sky can be seen through the little window in the roof, and through the wooden bars of the window lower down. Yet, whatever other living creatures may come or go, near those windows of the barn, and high up on its dark rafters, there is always one living creature working, ceaselessly working, meaning it doesn't stop. When through the skylight the sun god drives a golden sunbeam, the web of the unresting worker can also be seen, for the window is hung with shimmering gray cloths made by Arachne, the spider, and from rafter to rafter her threads are suspended with matchless skill. She was a girl once, they say, the daughter of Idmon the Dryer of Colophon, a city of Lydia. In all Lydia there was no one who could weave as well as the beautiful Arachne. To watch her brush the wool of the white fleeced sheep until in her fingers it grew like the soft clouds that hang round the hilltops was pleasure enough to draw a crowd from all over. So this text is a little bit tricky because in the first paragraph it describes one setting and then it introduces another. So what clues does the author give us that there's this signal shift in time? Like I said, it's a little bit tricky, but the myth begins here with the description of the setting and the introduction of a spider. But the first clue is that we have this flashback is that it says she once was a girl, they say. So then we go back because again, the author uses she once was a girl, showing that she is different now. So as the story continues, it's made clear that it was told from long ago. So for now, we'll focus on the story where it introduces the reader to Arachne. So we're going to read a little bit more, but still looking for the exposition, the place where the characters, setting, and conflict are introduced. So one day, Athena, goddess of craftsmen, heard news that there was a girl whose skill rivaled that of the goddess herself, and she, always jealous, disguised herself a woman, bent with age and leaning on her cane, joined the little crowd that so often hung around Arachne as she did her busy work with the needle. As the crowd watched, woven flowers sprang up under Arachne's fingers, just as real as the flowers that spring from the ground. Despite herself, Athena marveled at the magic skill of the fair Arachne. So here we need to record on our chart an episode from the exposition here. So I want us to think about Athena, goddess of craftsmen, heard the news that there was a girl whose skill rivaled that of the goddess herself. So here we want to go ahead and add that Athena in the exposition hears of Arachne's talent and wants to see her in action. So we have our characters and what is the introduction to the conflict a little bit. Well, she wants to see her in action. So we are going to write that on our chart, and then next we are going to pay attention to what the conflict could be. Again, conflict is a struggle between the main character and someone or something else, usually introduced still in the exposition. Gently she spoke to the girl, and with the words of a wise old woman, and warned her that she must not let her ambitions soar too high. Be careful, girl. There's no better craftswoman than the goddess Athena, and were you to dream that one day you might equal her, that would indeed be a crime for any god to punish. Glancing up for a moment from the picture, whose perfect colors grew fast under her slim fingers, Arachne fixed scornful eyes on the woman and gave a merry laugh. Did you say equal, Athena, old woman? She said. You must be from the far-off hills where the goat herds live. Otherwise you would not speak to me, Arachne, of equaling the work of Athena. Excelling is the better word. There it is, right? We have our conflict that Arachne wants to be a better weaver than the goddess Athena. So I want you to add that to your chart under conflict, that Arachne wants to be a better weaver than the goddess Athena. Of course, as you're writing that down, as we continue with our events and leading into our rising action, the conflict just gets more and more developed. It gets a little bit more complicated throughout the rising action. So as I read a little bit more, I want you to think about, well, what could be the rising action? Which is, again, the further development of the conflict, which leads to the climax. So follow along here. Be careful what you say, child. There may indeed be punishment with time, the old woman croaked. Laughing still, Arachne replied, I don't fear Athena. And turning to the crowd who, half afraid, listening to her daring words, she said, You who watch me day by day, you know well that I am not just boasting. My skill is as great as that of Athena, and greater still it shall be. Let Athena compete with me if she dare. Well do I know who will be the victor. Enraged at the girl's bold words and her challenge, Athena cast off her disguise, meaning she revealed herself. The crowd cowered as before them stood the radiant goddess with eyes that blazed with anger and insulted pride. Athena is here, she said, and the crowd fell on their knees before her, humbly adoring. Arachne alone was unabashed. Her cheeks showed how fast her heart was beating. From rosy red to white went the color in them, yet in firm, low voice she spoke. I have spoken the truth, she said. Not woman nor goddess can weave like me. I am ready to abide by what I have said, and if I did boast, by my boast I stand. If you will agree, great goddess, to try your skill against mine and you win, I will gladly pay the price. The gray eyes of Athena the goddess grew dark as the sea when a thundercloud hangs over it and a mighty storm is coming. Not for one moment did she delay, but took her place by the side of Arachne. On the loom they stretched out 2 webs with a fine yarn and quickly set to work. So let's summarize the rising action in this way. Arachne doesn't listen and she challenges Athena to a weaving contest. So let's add that here. Athena warns Arachne to be careful of her pride. Arachne doesn't listen and she challenges Athena to a weaving contest. So I want you to jot that down also on your chart. As you're doing that, we'll then move on to the climax, which remember is kind of the turning point of the conflict where we're on the edge of our seat, kind of wondering, oh my goodness, the story could go one way or the other. The conflict could be resolved in a positive way or maybe not so much. So do you remember the moment when we read in the story last time and it kind of like made you gasp? That's likely the climax. So let me read that next part. Then at last the storm broke, and with a scream, the enraged goddess shredded the Arachne's weaving. The beautiful pictures were torn into rags and ribbons. So here we are. This is the climax right here. And I want you to add it to your chart. The goddess shredded Arachne's weaving. So here, realizing that she is not winning the contest, Athena rips Arachne's tapestry, or the work that she embroidered, to shreds. So I want you to jot that down and be thinking as you're jotting that down, how did the story end up ending? We have to have our outcome of the climax, which is the resolution. All right, readers, let's find out what our resolution is. Again, the resolution is describing the results of the climax and ties together the loose endings of the story. Listen as I read. Arachne, shamed to dust, knew that life for her was no longer worth living. She had aspired, in the pride of her splendid genius, to compete with a god and knew now that such a contest can never be won. Athena looked at her and smiled with icy kindness. O guilty and shameless Arachne, for evermore you and your descendants will live and weave as you did today, so that men will never forget the punishment of those dare to rival a god. Even as Athena spoke, Arachne's fair form dried up and withered. Her straight limbs grew gray and crooked and wiry, and her smooth white arms were no more. 8 legs sprouted, and her body shrank. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, there was silence. Tiny beside the loom, where just moments before the beautiful weaver of Lydia had stood, called a creature that few love and many fear. Think about how would you describe the resolution here? I want you to go ahead and add it to your chart. Athena tells Arachne her punishment, and then Arachne is transformed into a spider. Okay, so jot that down. Athena tells Arachne her punishment, and Arachne is transformed into the spider. So I want us to think about then, well, how does each episode or event lead to the resolution? And so it's kind of hard to think about that in the exposition. Obviously, I could say, well, the exposition sets the context, including characters and conflict, but it's much more helpful in our analysis to be specific. So I would say, well, this episode in the exposition where Athena hears of Arachne's talent and wants to see her in action leads to the resolution because it's the beginning of the interaction between Athena and Arachne. So I want you to add that to your chart. It's the beginning of the interaction between Athena and Arachne. And then I think about the conflict. Arachne wants to be a better weaver than the goddess Athena. How does this event lead to the resolution? I mean, without a conflict, is there really a story? So it's not surprising that without the conflict between the mortal Arachne and the goddess Athena, there would not have been a story to resolve. It's as simple as that. So take a minute and add that to your chart. The rising action states that Athena warns Arachne to be careful of her pride. Arachne doesn't listen and challenges Athena to a weaving contest. How does this lead toward the resolution? I think it's important to note that the author gets the reader's attention in the rising action. If there's not enough tension in the rising action, a reader will probably become disinterested in a story. So what do we see in this story's rising action that makes us want to know what happens in the climax? I think that Arachne made some pretty bold statements. So this episode leads to the resolution because there's a chance for Arachne to back down from her boasting or her bragging. But when she doesn't, it's clear there's going to be a contest. So we'll jot that down as the rising action. And we've made it to the point that we see how the conflict ends, which is at the climax. So realizing she's not winning the contest, Athena rips Arachne's tapestry to shreds. So I want you to think about, how does this episode move the plot toward the resolution, meaning the ending of the story? I wrote that the episode leads to the resolution because Athena rips up her tapestry, making it clear that no matter how talented Arachne is, she cannot win a contest with a goddess. So this leads to the resolution because she cannot win against a goddess. And in the last part, the resolution, Athena tells Arachne her punishment, and Arachne is transformed into a spider. It's a little funny to ask, how does the resolution lead to the resolution? So we want to still include it. Here, I'm thinking that Arachne loses her pride, but is punished by being turned into a spider. So in this lesson, you have learned how to analyze how a story's plot unfolds in a series of episodes by identifying major episodes and considering each episode's role in the plot. Again, it's super important that as readers we understand every event, episode, whatever you might want to call it, is there for a reason. It's called author's craft. Authors craft their stories to help us readers understand that every scene is there for a reason, and we have to consider, okay, well, why is it there? And how does that help develop the plot? And one of the ways we can do that is by asking, how does this particular event or episode lead to the resolution? So now it is time for your independent assignment today. Again, this will be on your own, so I want you to grab your pencil and a piece of paper so that you can complete your independent practice. It will be helpful to have your chart that we just completed from your guided practice. You are going to choose one episode and write a paragraph about the importance of that episode in the overall plot. Again, be thinking about, well, why is this important? And then consider, how does this episode move toward the resolution? You will use the text evidence that you collected and the notes you took about the explanation in your paragraph. Use this structure to organize your paragraph. Include an introductory sentence with the title, author, and genre, which is the origin myth, a 1 to 2 sentence summary of the story, 3 to 4 sentences to explain the episode and its role in the plot, meaning explain the event, what happened, and why it's important to the story. And then finish with 1 concluding sentence to end your paragraph. I hope you do a wonderful job on that. I enjoyed looking a little deeper into this myth with you today and analyzing how the story develops throughout the text. Thank you so much for inviting me into your home. I look forward to seeing you in our next lesson in Tennessee's at-home learning series for literacy. Bye.
We know this year didn't go according to plan. Life occasionally springs a pop quiz on you, but you passed the test. Your family is proud of you, and Tennessee is proud of you. This year may have been different, but you met the moment and graduated. And we, at the Tennessee Department of Education, want to spend the next few weeks celebrating your accomplishment. Congratulations, class of 2020.